All right, coming up in just a few minutes on Let It Rip Weekend, Attorney General Jeff Sessions has a plan to nip marijuana in the bud.
Yeah, the feds say they will enforce all pot laws, even in states where pot is legal for recreational or medicinal purposes. So could those using pot legally today go to jail tomorrow? Plus, how will it impact on the current ballot proposal to legalize pot for recreational use right here in Michigan? A lot of people wondering that one as well, Charlie.
Well, two issues here. First of all, on a federal level, apparently under the Obama administration, if the states legalize pot for recreational or for medical purposes, the feds would stay off. They don't care because marijuana is illegal under federal law no matter what. Well, now this week, just a couple days ago, Attorney General said, now we're going to perhaps enforce, or at least leave it up to the U.S. attorneys in each different state to enforce federal law. A lot of people are worried about that, and it's going to have a big effect here in Michigan, too.
And there's a lot of money on the table.
Oh, billions on the table.
All right, don't forget, you can join in the conversation. Use the hashtag #LetItRip to see your comments on air at the end of the show.
All right, Let It Rip Weekend is next. Today on Let It Rip Weekend.
It's a historic day, and that's what I'm here to represent.
California opening its doors to marijuana smokers after legalizing recreational pot this week. But now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is threatening their business after toughening up federal policy when it comes to marijuana.
Use of marijuana is detrimental, and we should not give encouragement in any way to it.
The issue drawing bipartisan backlash from states where pot is legal.
We will not be bullied by the Trump administration or by the Department of Justice.
So could these people doing and selling pot legally today go to jail tomorrow? Plus, will it have an impact on the current ballot proposal to legalize pot for recreational use right here in Michigan? Let It Rip Weekend starts right now. And thanks for joining us on Let It Rip Weekend.
Today we're talking about U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions rolling back the Obama-era policy that provided legal shelter for the sale of marijuana, both recreational and medicinal. This places thousands of marijuana businesses operating legally under state's law at risk. It's time to let it rip.
All right, first we have on the panel Judge Jodi Switalski, who served as a district judge for years, but then left the bench to kind of squash substance abuse. Next to her, from the Cannabis Counsel, Tom Lavigne. He provides legal services for cannabis caregivers and serves as the secretary for the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana like Alcohol. And on the end, Scott Masi from the Brighton Center for Recovery, a facility that helps young people battling drug problems. Last, certainly not least, attorney Barton Morris. He is with the Cannabis Legal Group. He focuses on all marijuana legal issues. All right, let's start.
All right, Judge, first question to you. Can someone partake in small amounts of marijuana, either recreational or medicinal, and still be a good person, still be a law-abiding citizen?
Well, let's get this straight. There's a lot of good people that are smoking pot and using CBDs for a lot of very legitimate reason. The drug war didn't work. Jeff Sessions is way off base. Even members of his own party are saying, whoa, Jeff, what are you doing? Drug war didn't work then, didn't work now. It's not going to. What is going to happen here is we're going to go ahead and see Congress act. They need to act so that you know, in fact, they've disenfranchised at this point millions and millions of people in these states that are in fact for or pro or effectively using the substance. I know this comes as a surprise, and I'm going to get to it because, you know, there's 70% of America that's for it, and there's not 70% of America that's united on anything right now. We've got to go ahead and have legislation that really compartmentalizes the good things about it, but then dumps all of its effort into the negative, which the more we know about pot, the more dangerous it's becoming.
Tom, is it dangerous?
No, it isn't. It's one of the most benign substances on the planet. It's a plant, let's remember. It's not one of these powerful pharmaceuticals that has led us to this opioid crisis that we're amidst. What are we doing here? We need to focus our priorities on this opioid crisis and be done with this. The law enforcement I know, they want to fight real crime. They want to fight sex trafficking and heroin. They don't want to deal with patients.
But are you worried that the feds are going to come in and bust someone for smoking some pot?
I don't buy it. I don't think that they're going to do this. It's impossible. We've turned the corner. There's no turning back.
Scott, what do you think about that? Shouldn't voters decide this issue?
Voters, yeah, of course, I mean, to a certain extent, but we need responsible legislation behind it as well. So, you know, when you have a new administration come in and they just reappointed 46 U.S. attorneys, you got to think, well, there's some changes going to come about.
Cracking down on pot.
So, well, and I don't think, this is just a memorandum that's been rescinded. Nothing's really changed. The only people that are affected are basically the venture capitalists. How can you run a legitimate industry on cash? Because the banking industry won't get involved and the insurance industry won't get involved. So this is just a way to pump the brakes, take a step back, and look at things in a little bit more comprehensive way.
Let's get Barton in here. You represent companies that want to start up businesses. Apparently, this is a billion-dollar industry. But Scott does make a point, though. Insurance companies will not insure these, and banks are not lending money. So unless you're independently wealthy, you're not going to be able to get pot to people that need it.
This is a $7 billion industry, and it's going to skyrocket in the next few years, especially because of what California and what Michigan is doing. There are insurance companies that will insure these businesses, but the banking situation is definitely what needs some assistance with Congress and Congress. They're going to do something about it because it is something that is a significant problem. Everybody's utilizing cash. We don't have the right to utilize bank accounts and credit cards. This is necessary. We need federal reform. And that's what's going to happen based upon what Jeff Sessions has done.
Well, and not only that, Charlie, what we're seeing in some of these states, I mean, Colorado, I call the petri dish for all of this. This is where it began. This is where we get to look at side effects and negative things and increased drug driving rates. But when we look at commerce, Barton's absolutely right. It's a $7 billion industry. That's what the Sackler family makes in 1 year off of OxyContin.
Is that a problem?
And look at the lobbying effort. So it's going to explode in Congress, this lobby. We're seeing all sorts of clandestine labs pop up. So there is a segment of medical marijuana growers or recreational marijuana growers that are legitimate. But what happens with all these other labs? It's a big business. And how do I compete with, you know, the next marijuana grower? I don't want to point at Barton. I don't know if you're growing pot or not, but we lace it.
I'm not.
And that's the problem with these clandestine labs, is that we're seeing a lot of fentanyl and things of that nature in the pot.
No, we're not finding fentanyl in this. We're finding fentanyl in the street drug.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we found it in Cleveland.
Okay, but Tom, but listen, if the Attorney General of the United States wants to crack down on pot for whatever reason, maybe place the fear in people like you who advocate smoking pot, there is not one constitutional argument you could make to have a right to smoke pot. Is that true?
It is against federal law, but we do have dual sovereignty in this system of federalism that we live in.
Right.
So our Supreme Court has ruled that our Medical Marijuana Act is legit. It's not preempted. It's in place. It's not going anywhere. And we're moving the ball forward. While at the same time, the feds could enforce it, but I believe that they're going to maintain their priorities. At Cannabis Counsel, we're representing businesses jumping into this. These are legitimate businesses getting into this for medical reasons.
Scott, do you think that Congress should regulate pot for medical purposes?
Well, I think Congress has a role, but you know what's so disenfranchising, and just to sit here and listen to us talk about the money aspect. You know, profits drove the opiate epidemic.
Yes, they did.
And it's you know, just it's ridiculous for us to talk about the billions of dollars that are possible. The thing is, in the state of Michigan, we collected $26.8 billion in taxes last year. The best case scenario for the state when they go to legalize it is $225 million. That's less than 1% of the tax we collect in this state. I mean, is that worth it? Less than 1%? And they keep on throwing this. It's profits over principle. And when you have the most vulnerable people that are going to be affected, the children and the urban communities, you know, we got to start recalibrating how we're thinking about this.
What are the dangers of legalization? What is it that
well, the danger, I mean, for me, it's the commercialization. It's looking at this from a profit-driven model. And we've
how
always
is that a danger, though, when...
Because,
I mean, you have to look at the marketing strategy. And again, I would go back to Colorado. When I drive, when I do all my traveling, we can go to California, we can go to Washington. When you have Elmo on the side of a building, you know, that's not appealing to me. I don't care about Elmo, but our teenagers do.
To market
well,
to children.
Listen, I'm not saying that there aren't legitimate industries that are out there doing it the right way. I'm not trying to say there aren't legitimate people using, okay? That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is it's about regulation. It's about making sure that the right message is getting out there, and that's where we have to stand in.
Purposes too?
Recreational purposes as well. Listen, marijuana is no better or no worse for you than alcohol. Now, I don't really know that that's the standard that we want, because it's killing more people in this country than even the opioid epidemic, and costs billions of dollars.
Alcohol has no medicinal benefit whatsoever. Alcohol is significantly worse than marijuana. Marijuana has medical benefits. That's the reason
CBDs have medical benefits.
But you know, alcohol in the beginning of prohibition did have medicinal purposes. So did cigarettes had medicinal purposes.
Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, you want to regulate marijuana like alcohol, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're okay with that?
Yes.
Well,
yes, we are. And we're putting it on the ballot this November for adult use. And that's going to significantly increase tax.
All right, let's hold tight on that issue, because we want to focus a lot on the Michigan factor, and there is a ballot issue likely that voters will vote on in this year. Don't forget, share your thoughts using the hashtag #LetItRip on Facebook and Twitter, and you may very well see your comments at the end of the show.
When we come back, we continue this conversation, but also we'll have a look at this policy and how it can change, and again, like Charlie said, how it can impact the state. We'll be right back.
Reversing direction, as the Attorney General has decided to do, is an overreach, not just against the city of Seattle and the state of Washington, but a majority of states now in this country.
The conversation we had that was specifically about this issue of states' rights in Colorado, until he lives up to that commitment, I will be holding all nominations.
All right, welcome back to Let It Rip Weekend. We are continuing our conversation on the rollback of the Obama administration's illegal memo, I guess, from Cole, that we want to be specific about this, which provided a legal shelter for the sale of marijuana, both recreational and medical. Some people are saying that smoking pot today is legal, but they could go to jail tomorrow. Let me start with Tom Lavigne here. By the way, Judge Jodi Switalski and Tom Lavigne, Scott Masi, and Barton Morris. Thank you, panel, for being here. Tom, let me start with you. You championed the cause to get this issue on the Michigan ballot. But as we just heard, it is still illegal under federal law. And now we're hearing that the Attorney General of the United States is going to crack down even if your proposal is successful. Do you think that your efforts are wrong, maybe shifted? You should be lobbying Congress as opposed to the state.
We have implemented a full court press right now on the U.S. Congress. Now's the time to act for Congress. What Sessions has done here has forced the hand of Congress. It's going to happen. It's been 100 years now. Do you think Congress should come up to speed by now? It's a Republican and Democrats are both in favor. It's, you know, Republicans are in favor of states' rights.
But it seems to be, Barton, if Michigan passes this, and likely it's going to be on the November ballot, from my understanding, assuming a couple little legal hurdles there, but for the most part, it'll be on the November ballot. It's still not going to be legal and safe for patients that want to use and need to use this. Your efforts are flawed, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely not. First of all, the 10th Amendment of our Constitution states that the states have the right to regulate and legalize things within their state that don't have any commerce throughout the states. And so we have the ability to do that. Republicans agree with that position, and Congress agrees with that position. Congress should represent the people, and the people say, 70% of the people say there should be some form of legalization of medical marijuana or adult use marijuana, and that's exactly what Congress needs to be getting on board with, regardless of what Jeff Sessions wants to do.
Why do you expect Congress to get involved now? This is something that's been kicked down the road for so long.
They have been involved. You should know that the Rohrabacher-Farr
position, though,
the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment has has precluded the Department of Justice from spending any money on medical marijuana initiatives with respect to states that have medical marijuana laws. That's about to be renewed probably on January 19th. And this is something that Jeff Sessions is about to do, is explode this issue so that all these congressmen can really get on board, because they represent the people, and the people say they want medical or recreational marijuana.
So, Judge Jodi, let's bring you in here on this one. Is it true, though, that if the state of Michigan adopts this idea where it's pretty much unregulated smoking of marijuana, edibles, whatever you want, you see a problem with that, don't you?
I do see a problem with that. First of all, there's not going to be any enforcement. Jody's up for election. His assistant is our new USAG. They're not going to upset 70% of the Michigan population that are going to the ballot in November. They're just not going to do that. Secondly, I think that we need to shift gears here. It's coming. The cows are out of the barn, whatever you want to say, right? So let's really, no, you can't put them back in. It's like herding cats. However, what we need to do is, you know, I had a 15-year-old come up to me and he said, you know what, it's legal in Colorado. He says, my parents use it. It's effective. It's good enough for me. In other words, it's normative for our kids. And there's absolutely no refuting that when your brain is not developed under the age of 23 to 25, there's significant consequences. And so we're taking a substance, we're making it normative for people. They're driving with it. That's where we need to focus our efforts. Let's regulate it and make it safe.
But isn't this where we were years ago with smoking? It was always legal, assuming you have to be a certain age or whatever, but then people got together and they said, you know, restriction, don't do it, there are dangers, put the thing on the box, all this stuff. Isn't that what we should do with marijuana?
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, we have so much that, you know, that's paved the way to this point that we sometimes just are blind to look at. I mean, because we're so driven by this profit-driven aspect of marijuana. But the thing is, when you're looking at where we're going and what the rhetoric is, I mean, you know, are we going to be able to regulate it? I mean, we're living in the worst opiate epidemic or the worst health epidemic in our society within the most regulated industry. And you know, for 2 years now, the life expectancy has gone down. It's never happened in this country.
Are you saying there's a connection between the legalization of marijuana and opioid use?
Well, I want to be careful on saying that.
Let me talk about that.
Well,
but,
there is a connection.
It's an exit drug for us.
No, it's, I mean, that's the rhetoric. That's the rhetoric that is so.
That's
I mean, that's a joke.
The matter. Look at the peer-reviewed research.
Look at over the 20 years that we've lessened the regulations of marijuana, and what's happened to the opiate epidemic. It's a crock to say that.
No, I mean, that is a result of doctors handing out opioids like
candy. Wait a minute.
I'm on heroin. I can get off heroin by doing pot?
Yes.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I work in a treatment center. I mean,
no.
Every kid, and they minimize it.
5,000 people died last year from opioids.
No,
not a one from marijuana.
Well, that's not actually true.
I'm an addict,
because
and I know the gateway
rates of marijuana are so significant now that people are going into psychoses. There are abdominal injuries. There's cardiac issues that are all being related to it. There's a decrease in IQ from 8 to 12 different points. We're looking at all sorts of maladies that if we would take the time and invest the monies to really figure it out, then we'd have something substantive as opposed to just these allegations that everything's peachy keen. Now, the data with regard to opioids and marijuana is all over the place, as is everything with marijuana. It's all over the place.
No, it isn't. The
unless you look at the stuff coming out of Israel, which is the only really good studies that exist. And so if we're going to sit here and yell and shout about things, yes, sometimes marijuana or CBDs especially help for pain management.
We need, marijuana is the least researched Schedule I drug right now.
No, it isn't.
It's the most researched. Look at the money spent. It doesn't come close. You guys
there's 26 states where it has been legalized.
No, not at all.
Road fatalities have decreased.
No,
they
haven't.
That is not true.
No, they're skyrocketing for drugs, and there's absolutely an judges' hands in this state are tied because the legislation is horrific with regard to driving under the influence.
Marijuana is the most researched drug. If you look at the National
I'm from Missouri. Show me. It's regulated by the Drug Enforcement Agency. They they won't release it.
Thank you. There's 26,000 peer-reviewed studies regarding marijuana. It is the most
I'd love to see the p-value and who peer-reviewed it.
The National Institute of Drug Abuse has identified and made statements that says that the majority of marijuana users don't move on to other drugs. Alcohol is more. Alcohol is a more of a gateway drug than marijuana.
Hold that thought. Okay, here we go.
All right, coming up next, we share your thoughts live on the air. My phone's been buzzing as yours. Oh, I know folks are tweeting. Use the hashtag #LetItRip. There's still a little time to get your comment in the show. We'll be right back.
Nothing's going to happen here.
And now it's time for you to be part of the discussion.
That's right. We'll start with this tweet from Denny Lou. It says, "Let it rip. What does it take to make marijuana use legal federally?" Tom, that one can go to you.
The U.S. Congress needs to open its eyes and not categorize it together with heroin. It's not the same as heroin. They need to deschedule it, and the U.S. Congress can do it with a vote.
All right, let's try this one here. Matt writes, if the federal government doesn't want to get on board, then they won't have the pleasure of having any financial benefits from the revenue made. Barton.
The financial benefits are generally going to be reserved to the states, but the federal government, the Congress, needs to do what our voters want. What our population wants to do, that's what they should be doing. And if they don't want to vote with our Constitution, with our voters, then they should be removed.
They're disenfranchising millions of voters by not listening.
Okay. Scott, let me ask you this one from Mary West. She says marijuana directly affects drug sales of pills prescribed by doctors. That's why they're going after pot. It's cutting into big pharma's profits.
You know, I mean, that's the conspiratorial view. I don't know anything that that can back that kind of rhetoric, but that's the unfortunate part of some of the beliefs that take hold with this issue. So
let me go. This is one for Judge Jodi. If you want, Charles writes that if you want to enforce and make pot legal, start with enforcing the doctors who write the prescriptions that allow people to obtain medical marijuana cards. They give them out like free water. Judge, do they?
Absolutely. So we've got to educate our doctors. Listen, I don't want to victimize docs, but yes, we have to educate and enforce doctors. Doctors need to inform, monitor, and document their patients for signs of a disease state. That's what that's all about.
All right, what about this one? I highly doubt our society needs another socially accepted drug in addition to alcohol and nicotine. Haven't they already caused enough havoc? Scott, you can take that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in the last 5 years, I've probably spoken to over 50,000 people, asking them the one question. Do you have a hard time getting your weed? When I'm talking to the people in treatment. And nobody has had a hard time. So maybe we need to relook at this as from a decriminalization aspect.
Cindy writes, can we worry about the heroin and opioid problem instead of a plant grown in the ground? Not a pot smoker, but I've seen the benefits for medical patients. I know that two people are shaking their head. Judge, why don't you take that one real quick?
What we need to do is we need to worry about our addiction epidemic, and that's what it's really about. Whether it's marijuana or opioids or benzodiazepines or stimulants, we need to worry about addiction prevention.
In 5 seconds, Bart, what do you say?
There's been 65,000 overdose deaths in this country in the past year. Marijuana will significantly reduce those opiate deaths. There's over 20,000 of those.
Barton, Jodi, Tom, Scott, thanks so much. That's all the time.